There are places in the world where time seems suspended, where the air carries an inexplicable weight, and silence guards secrets as ancient as existence itself. In a small, forgotten village nestled in the Romanian mountains, a region known for its dense forests and eternal fogs, a legend was born that should never have been uncovered. This is where our first account begins, with Mariana, a 34-year-old librarian with a passion for ancient documents. She found a worn manuscript bound in a leather cover that smelled of mold and something more, something unsettling. Mariana worked in a private archive maintained by a local historian, a peaceful task for someone who loved silence and monotony. However, upon opening that cursed book, she began to feel a cold, tingling sensation creeping up her spine. The words told of an ancient ritual, capable of opening portals to a world where creatures inhabited humanity's darkest dreams. At first, she thought it was just a fable, a story to frighten children and keep strangers away from the village. But what happened in the following nights made her doubt everything. On the third night after reading, strange sounds echoed in her house, incomprehensible whispers, light footsteps in the hallway, shadows dancing on the walls with no discernible source. Mariana tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched was inescapable. It was on the fourth night that she saw it, an indistinct, slender figure with eyes glowing deep red, standing in the corner of her room. She froze. The being didn't move, only watched, until it vanished into a thick mist that filled the room. Trying to maintain her sanity, Mariana decided to revisit the manuscript for answers, but as she flipped through it, she realized some pages were missing, as if torn out. When the clock struck midnight, a low, cruel laugh filled the room, and the temperature plummeted. The next day, the young woman appeared in the village with strange marks on her body, like deep burns shaped like unknown symbols, and no memory of what had happened the previous night. Days later, she was found dead. In her apartment, eyes wide, fixed on nothing, with a smile of pure terror frozen on her face. The forensics team couldn't explain the cause of death. There were no visible injuries, no signs of poisoning, just a morbid coldness that seemed to emanate from the victim's body itself. The manuscript was gone. Whatever pursued her that night took Mariana with it to a place no one should ever go. This was the first dark chapter in a series of accounts involving beings beyond human comprehension, marks that leave scars on both soul and flesh, and deaths that defy logic. Some nights fear comes not just from something you see, but from what's invisible, what whispers behind the door, what cannot be explained. In the interior of Oregon, USA, in a small forgotten town, lived Lucas, a 26-year-old who worked as an electronic systems maintenance technician. He was known for being a skeptic, someone who didn't believe in ghosts, urban legends, or any spine-chilling stories. Everything changed on one fateful night. Lucas was called to fix an old security system in an abandoned mansion that belonged to a local family, famous for its dark secrets. The place had been deserted for over 2 decades, but recent reports indicated that strange noises and apparitions scared anyone who approached. For Lucas, it was just another job. But when he entered the mansion, something immediately made him feel like he was walking into an invisible trap. Upon turning on the equipment, the system began emitting strange interference, and the security cameras showed disconnected images of people who had never been there. Shadowy figures, distorted outlines, empty eyes. In the middle of the night, Lucas heard footsteps ascending the stairs, but upon investigating, he found only silence. The most terrifying moment was when he realized his own image on the cameras seemed to multiply, and one of them, unlike the others, smiled at him in a twisted way, almost as if it knew something he didn't. The technician tried to flee, but the main door locked itself with a bang. The system shut down, and the house was plunged into a dense, almost palpable darkness. He felt invisible hands grasping his wrists and a freezing cold that stole his voice. It was at that instant that he saw a fleeting shadow materialize right in front of him, a grotesque entity with grey, cracked skin, bottomless black eyes, and a smile so macabre it seemed to bleed. Lucas tried to scream, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. The next morning, the police found the mansion empty, the doors unlocked, and signs of struggle on the walls. Lucas was never found. His backpack with tools and his cell phone was discarded. On the floor, containing a recorded video where he whispered almost in tears, "They don't want me to leave here. If anyone finds this, run." This story isn't just about apparitions, it's about places that imprison the souls of those who dare invade their secrets, about how the invisible can be as lethal as what we see. And you, sitting there, have you ever felt something you couldn't explain? Something that made you look back and want to run? If so, share your experience in the comments. I want to know the extent of your fear. And if you haven't had such contact yet, stay vigilant, because you never know when something will look back at you in the dark. Oh, and before I forget, if you're enjoying this dive into the shadows, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't just tell stories. We create a community to share fears, accounts, and lessons that only darkness can reveal. Come with us, activate the bell, and be part of this dark journey. In the remote village of Siberia, Russia, where winter seems to eternalize the darkness, there was a case that still haunts residents and travelers alike. Marina, a 30-year-old young teacher who had moved there to escape the hustle and bustle of the big city, barely knew that this frozen land held a terrible secret. The house where she came to live had been abandoned for years, but due to the low price and her need for a new beginning, Marina accepted. In the very first nights, she realized she wasn't alone. An intense cold invaded the rooms, despite the heating being on, and indecipherable whispers echoed through the corridors. One morning, Marina woke up with such a strong sense of presence that she couldn't move. In the corner of the room, a tall, humanoid shadow seemed to observe her. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped. The entity advanced slowly, and as it approached, Marina saw that its eyes were completely black, and from its mouth a dark liquid slowly oozed, as if it were bleeding an eternal darkness. The following days were a walking nightmare. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and sometimes Marina felt as if something touched her cold skin. When she sought help, the local residents told her that the region was cursed by an ancient legend, that of a creature known as the Snow Reaper, which fed on the souls of those who dared inhabit its land. But the climax of the horror occurred on a stormy night, when Marina tried to escape and realized the roads were blocked by trees that seemed to move on their own. Trapped, she tried to protect herself inside the house, but was surprised by the creature that invaded the place, tearing out her soul while its black eyes smiled with cruel satisfaction. Days later, when the police finally managed to arrive, the house was frozen, with deep marks on the walls and a heavy feeling that no one could explain. Marina was never seen again, and the only thing left were whispers in the wind, warning no one to set foot there when the snow begins to fall. Now let me ask you, if you were in a place like this, isolated, where darkness isn't just the absence of light but the presence of evil, what would you do to survive? Write your strategy here, and who knows, among the stories you tell, we might discover a way to outwit the terror. I really want to hear what you would do in this situation of absolute fear. In the Australian outback, among the vast arid plains, there's a village forgotten by time called Yalunga. A story is told that few dare to mention, about a creature that walks between the dead and the living, known by the locals as the Desert Shadow. The protagonist of this story is Lucas, a 34-year-old geologist who was sent on an expedition to the region to study rare rock formations. In the very first days, he felt a weight in the air, as if something invisible was following him, lurking in every moment of silence. One night, while camping alone, he heard soft, dragging footsteps in the sand. Looking outside, he saw a hooded figure, completely black with no visible face, just an emptiness that consumed the light around it. Lucas tried to run, but his muscles seemed petrified, and the figure approached slowly, as if it had all the time in the world. Days later, his body was found on the edge of a cliff, with no signs of struggle, but with strange burn marks scattered across his skin. The most bizarre detail. Nearby, tracks of footprints that belonged to no known animal, made by feet that seemed to fuse with the sand, as if the shadow itself had walked Lucas to his death. What did Lucas find in that desert? What was that shadow that seemed to control time itself? The villagers say that the desert shadow chooses its victims carefully, taking them to a place where the sun never rises, where light is just a myth. This type of presence seems to feed on fear, despair, and loneliness, and whoever crosses its path has their fate sealed, an unexplained disappearance or an end as cold as the Australian night. And you, when you find yourself alone, do you feel fear? How do you react to the silence that screams? Tell me here, what was the scariest situation you've ever experienced, or something you could never face alone? Your story might be what we need to understand what exists beyond the veil of the unknown. In the heart of Romania, in a remote village called Val das Nevoas, Valley of Mists, there's a legend that spans generations, a horror story that blends the supernatural with human cruelty. The protagonist of this last narrative is Anna, a 38-year-old doctor who decided to spend a season in the region to help the local community, far from modernity and city lights. Anna soon realized that something strange lurked in that place. Patients arrived with mysterious, inexplicable wounds like burns, but that healed strangely, leaving marks that resembled ancient symbols. The worst happened at night, when somber sounds echoed through the houses and shadows danced on the walls, as if something invisible was lurking. One dawn, Anna was awakened by a desperate call coming from the nearby forest. Upon arriving, she found an old altar made of bones and disturbing objects next to a mutilated body with clear signs of a brutal death. The silence was broken by a chilling whisper. They returned to reap. The next morning, the village was different. The residents, previously suspicious, were now terrified, as if they knew something ancient and malicious was awakening, an entity that fed on pain, blood, and soul. Anna, in her struggle against fear and the unknown, discovered that the evil there had deep roots in the shadows of history and in occult practices that should never have been disturbed. The doctor tried to flee, but something prevented her, as if the village itself were a cursed prison. In the days that followed, reports of disappearances, hallucinations, and horrendous deaths multiplied. Anna was the last to be seen, with empty eyes and a scream trapped in her throat, echoing to this day among the trees of the Valley of Mists. This is the end of our account, a story that speaks of the darkness that dwells not only outside, but within each of us, ready to emerge when we least expect it. If you've made it this far, thank you for diving into these stories with me. If they moved you, if they awakened any fear or curiosity, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring these dark universes together. And what's more, how about sharing in the comments any supernatural experience you've had or something you've learned from these narratives? Your voice is part of this community, and together we can unravel the mysteries the world hides. Don't forget that terror is more than fear. It's an invitation to reflection, courage, and respect for the unknown. Until our next encounter, where new dark stories await you.